Yes crew, what is good? I'm Liam Cox from Tech House Market, and today we're going to go over the fundamentals of send effects and buses. So we're just going to go over where and when to send your audio channels to buses and what effects to put on them and how to use them correctly basically. Let's dive straight into this project. This is a track that I've nearly finished, and it's a good example to show you guys where I've used send effects and buses, etc. As it's got some vocals and some other sort of bits that I've done where I've used these effects. So if we just listen to a snippet of the track, just so you guys get an idea.
I've got you on my mind.
So as you can hear, sort of really nice darkish vocal hook with some groovy bass and drums, and then the odd synth shot here and there to sort of complement it. But yeah, this is a good track to show you guys, as I've used quite a lot of sends, whether that be on the synths or the vocals. So if we start off, what is actually sending to a bus and why should you do it? If you have a sound here, for example, I'm going to use this sort of stab sound that I've got. So an FM sort of type stab. If we were to add an effect just directly on the channel, for example a reverb, instead of on a send, then because it's directly on the channel, it's going to affect the current sound. So it's going to change the characteristics, etc, depending on how much reverb you put on, but it can take away from the original actual sonics of the sound, which is why if you're happy with a sound and you just want to add to it, then you should use a send. We do this basically by going on our channel here and then going to this section here where you can send, and then you choose a bus. And now I've got a load of buses sort of set up. If I've got an idea in my head, I can quickly bring it onto sort of the page, if that makes sense. So I've got some ones here, for example, some reverbs, and then some delays for my vocals, etc. And then just some other stuff. And I've saved this as a template, so it's always a good idea if you guys get sort of stuck or feel like it's taking a while to sort of do these things on every project, then it's a great idea to sort of get a template down. So in this instance, I've already got one set up to a bus, and I've basically put a reverb on this bus, a Valhalla vintage verb. This knob here controls how much of the original audio signal I'm going to be sending to this bus. So that way we're going to keep our original sound of this stab, and the send to the reverb will be an addition to the original sound. So it will add to it. It won't mess with the original sound, it will just be on top of that, if that makes sense. That's the beauty of using buses. You still get your main original sound to sort of stand out, and then the send will obviously like be more in the background, and depending on what you've got on your bus. So I've got a reverb here, but you can use like delays, etc. What I normally do is open up, for example, a reverb, and then just change the sort of settings to something that would suit what I need it for, and then I'll slowly bring up this level of the send to the bus until I'm sort of happy with the results. So obviously that's a very extreme example, but you can hear we're not losing the tonality and the sonics of our original sound. So if, for example, you want to add some effects to your synths or your vocals, then it's always a good idea to use sends instead of putting the effects directly on your bus, because then you're going to ruin and change the original sound completely. That's basically what I normally do on my synths, etc. Now if we go to the vocal here, I can show you guys what I'm doing. So I've got a sort of vocal chop / hook here.
I've got you on my mind.
So as you can hear, I've got some like reverb and then some long delays on that. And this is also done through sending this vocal bus channel to another bus. So on these ones, I've got a reverb one, which I'm sending to, and then some delays, 16th, 8ths and quarter notes. So that way I'm keeping my original vocal at the forefront of the mix. And then all of these other effects, because I'm sending them to a bus, they're sort of an addition to what I've already got. And you can also change the levels of the channels of the actual sends. So this way, it's more like customizable. You can automate it as well. So yeah, it's overall for that sort of stuff, it's a better way to do it than putting the effects directly on the channel. But there are some cases, for example, here I've got a cool sort of atmosphere loop that I've created. So I've got some other effects on there, but I wanted this loop to sort of sit in the background, be like a bed for other elements to sort of sit on. So I wanted it to sort of sound a bit like reverby, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I decided to put the reverb directly onto the channel rather than using it as a send, because if we take this off and now listen to the loop, it sounds completely dead. And because this is not at the forefront of my mix, it's not one of the main elements, I don't really mind not having this original sound, or I don't really need it. And by using this directly on here, it creates a lot more texture as well. So if we listen to it now, just flows much better. And I've just adjusted the mix here to taste, basically, to see what works with the track. So another positive of using sends and bus effects is that it can save a lot of CPU space. For example, if I've got, let's say, 10 to 12 tracks in this project that I want to use my reverb on, and I open up 12 different instances of a third-party reverb plugin, then it's going to eat up a lot of my CPU space. So some people's PCs might not even be able to handle this, so it's always a good sort of practice as well to use the sends just for that case, because a lot of people, for example, their project might not be workable in, and you want to save your CPU space for like big synths or big third-party instruments that you might be using. So instead of, for example, having 12 different instances of my Valhalla reverb, I'm just sending a lot of my channels to the same bus, so to bus 17, and this way I'm only using one reverb instance, saving a lot of CPU space. And as well as that, generally in a track, you want all of your elements to be sitting in sort of the same space. So if my reverb is set up a certain way, then it will generally sound better if all of your elements are sitting in the same reverb and it will gel together. Whereas a lot of people send their elements to, or have different types of reverbs, and it just sounds really muddy and it doesn't really work well. So you have control over this as well through the channel. So another thing that I like to do with my reverb is, before I have the instance of reverb on my bus, I like to put a EQ just to cut out some of the muddiness and also some of the harsh highs, and that's just a good practice just to sort of keep your mix clean. So yeah, you wouldn't be able to do something like that if you was using the reverb directly on your channel, because all I'm doing there is cutting the lows out of the reverb, which is coming out of the bus. So one final cool trick you can do when using send effects and buses is that on your vocal delays, you can use a compressor to basically not make the delays as messy and sort of clashing with each other. So the way I like to do this is I'll send my bus to a delay. For example, here I've got a quarter note delay. So I've dialed in the amount of send I want to put on my bus, and this is going to an echo boy. Then after that, I've got a reverb as well, like before, cutting out the muddiness and some of the highs. And then if I click play now with the quarter delay on the vocal,
I've got you on my mind.
as you can hear, it's fairly messy when the vocal is being performed because we have the delay playing at the same time. And a good reason to use buses for delays is you can add a compressor after the delay. And then what we can do here, you can do something similar like this in Ableton and FL as well. If you go to your compressor and you go to sidechain, what I've done here is I've sidechained this compressor to the vocal bus, and what this will do is it will reduce the volume of the quarter note delay when sound is being put into the vocal bus. So basically, when the vocal is sung, the quarter note delay will be reduced in volume, and depending on our attack and release settings, it will then go back up when the vocal stops playing. For example, if we click play now,
I've got you on my mind.
so I've got it pretty heavily compressing so that the vocal is clear when it's being sung, and then as soon as it stops, I've got my release sort of dialed in to where I wanted it. It goes back down and the quarter note delay cuts through the mix, and this is a much better way of doing it than having your quarter note delay on your actual vocal channel, because you wouldn't be able to do something like this without affecting sort of the original sound like before. So if you guys learned something today about buses and send effects, then please leave a comment below, and also leave in the comments what you want to see next time as a tutorial, because we always love to sort of hear your guys' ideas. And also take a look at our Discord group, Tech House Market. There'll be a link in the description below, and if you enjoyed, leave a like on the video, subscribe to Tech House Market, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.